Welcome, and let's dive into a very relevant and important topic today. You would already have seen the numerous model integrations available as part of the TrueFoundry AI gateway. But running self-hosted models is often very important to organizations with specific requirements, requiring maximum data privacy, security, or even running custom fine-tuned models behind the gateway. First, let's have a quick overview of certain fundamental concepts when it comes to deployment within the core MLOps platform offered by TrueFoundry in addition to the AI gateway. Let's understand where the deployment actually occurs, and here we will explore cluster, workspace, repository, and environment. 4 distinct concepts. A cluster in TrueFoundry refers to an actual Kubernetes cluster in either one of your cloud accounts or on-prem. A TrueFoundry workspace refers to a namespace in Kubernetes. Basically, a cluster can have multiple workspaces, which are essentially logical separations so that different teams, applications, and environments can sit within the same cluster. Repositories in TrueFoundry are repositories to store models, data artifacts, and prompts. They are basically backed by a blob storage like S3, GCS, or Minio, and you can configure read-write access. Once the workspace has access to a ML repo, all applications inside the workspace can then read or write to that particular repository. This way you do not need to inject any keys, and this makes the entire system much secure. Finally, environment is a tag which is applied to workspaces to categorize them based on factors like development stage, staging stage, or production stage. So depending on what stage it is, you can actually have different environments and you can tag them to a workspace. So there's a one-on-one tagging with a workspace. And remember, a cluster can have multiple workspaces, so a same cluster can have multiple environments also by extension. All right. Now let's understand the how of deployment, right? How do we actually deploy these self-hosted models? So what you see here is a schematic that outlines multiple deployment options, not only across LLMs and vLLMs, but also across other model types, right? Like read anchor models, embedding models, and we have a bunch of model server options which are already available. So TrueFoundry does not provide any client-side framework for model deployment because we believe there are already great open source frameworks to build inference services out there, and we do not want to build yet another one. And this also helps you avoid any vendor lock-in with TrueFoundry, right? If you want to migrate to some other platform. All right. So for LLMs and vLLM models, the main ones that we will look at is vLLM, SGLang, and TensorRT-LLM, right? And you can see the benefit of this is that TrueFoundry basically manages the Kubernetes infrastructure for model inference with auto scaling, model caching. A lot of these configurations you will see when we come to the service deployment part in option 3, when we are deploying the third self-hosted model, you'll see how many configurations you can actually manage, right? And coming to that, basically you can deploy models from HuggingFace or any custom models that you have logged in the TrueFoundry model registry, or via your own custom inference code in any of the frameworks, right, on the platform, right? So there are 3 distinct ways. And all model API deployments in TrueFoundry are basically abstractions on top of the service deployment feature. So that's why it's highly recommended to go deep into service deployment and then start using the model deployment, which is basically an abstraction on top of the service deployment. So these concepts will become clear when we come to the hands-on demo. Now let's see the plan for today. We will have 3 examples of deployment of self-hosted models. The first one is we will deploy DeepSeek R1 distilled version where the student model is Qwen 1.5 billion, right? We'll use the model deployment feature to do this. Then we will also use the model deployment feature to deploy another model, Mixtral 8x22 billion, which is a mixture of experts model, right? And because this is gated, we will see how to use the secret stored feature within TrueFoundry. And finally, we will use the service deployment with a vLLM Docker image where we will basically deploy Llama 3.2 3 billion instruct model. So this is the plan for today. Now let's dive in and let's get started. First off, I want to show you where on the platform can you actually see the clusters, workspaces, repositories, and environments. So there are 2 distinct places in the platform, and this is the admin view. You can see a control panel if you are an admin. An admin can typically be of cloud SecOps team or DevOps team in an organization, right? And a user does not need to have access to the control panel, right? So this control panel is mainly for governance and maintenance of the different clusters, right? And the main core features are on the compute panel just above the control panel, right? So the AI gateway is basically in the compute plane. So here are the different clusters which are already set up. You can always create a new cluster, right? And you can also attach an existing cluster. So what we'll do in the demo is we will use the TFI AWS cluster. So that's one. Now remember, cluster can have multiple workspaces. So the workspace that we will basically use is the LLM demo workspace, which is basically tied into this particular cluster that we just saw. And if I go to edit this and see the details, you will see that this is also tagged to one environment, which is the development environment, right? And you can also give it permissions to certain repositories. So this workspace has actually permission for this particular repository. So these are the main basic concepts that we discussed in theory earlier, and this is how you can actually tie in with the platform. All right. So now let's see the deployment. So for that, you need to navigate to the top in the compute plane, and this is deployments. Now let's start a new deployment, right? So this is the screen that comes up, and you'll see that there are a bunch of options available. Firstly, you can also have a natural language query and deploy something. But what you can additionally do is you can have structured methods to deploy different things, and we'll focus on model deployments and service deployments mainly. But you can also do job deployments, right? Launch of Jupyter notebooks and a bunch of other things. So that's not the focus today. Let's focus on the first deployment, and let's click model. First thing you need to do is to select the workspace. So I will select the LLM demo workspace, and then you need to enter the HuggingFace URI of a model to deploy, right? So firstly, what I'll do is I'll just use a quick select. I'll just select this particular language model, but note that you can also do embedding models, re-ranking models, vision, image, speech to text. And this is just a quick select option. You can always have your own custom HuggingFace URI apart from these existing quick select models and also deploy those. So let me just select DeepSeek R1, Distill Quen 1.5 billion. And this has been auto-populated with the task being text generation. Now when I click next, what happens is the platform automatically actually tells you what all machine configurations are viable to actually deploy this model basis your cluster. So remember, the cluster is AWS based, right? So if you're trying to deploy via vLLM model serving, or SGLang or TensorRT-LLM, the different machine configurations are basically suggested, and you can just pick any of these, right? And again, which model server to use is also a consideration, where we have details mentioned, so you can go through it, and this is going to be your decision. So vLLM is typically a balanced choice with the most flexibility, so we'll just choose that for now, and I'll just choose the first one here. All right, so after that, this is the form that you need to fill in. This is the name of the model, and all of this has been auto-populated for you. You do not need to do anything here, right? Just note that it is auto-populating the Docker image URI and the command override. Ports are configured, right? Because vLLM automatically spins up the OpenAI compatible server at 8,000 ports. So that's automatically filled in here. The resources are mentioned like we selected earlier. Now capacity type, you can prefer spot, and then you can have a fallback to on demand, or you can select spot, which is cheaper typically, or you can select on demand, right? So you can choose any of these here. Shared memory size is basically you're defining the shared memory requirements for your workload, and this is optional. So this is mentioned as 12.6 GB here. And then certain environment variables are already configured for you, right? So some important ones are model name, dtype, and so on. And these are referenced in our command override as well, right? So model ID is referenced, model name is referenced, and so on. Then the artifacts download is also optional, but this is good because you can download and cache models in a volume. This will basically enhance loading speeds and reduce costs by avoiding repeated downloads, right? So artifacts are typically downloaded to repositories, right? That's where it's important to understand the repository concept. And this is auto-populated for you. All right. And one important thing to note is to deploy, typically auto shutdown is a good configuration to go for, because this will automatically bring down your replicas if no requests are received for some time, and this will save you a lot of cost. So by default, if the service does not receive traffic for 900 seconds, it will auto shutdown, right? So let's do that. And then you have different rollout strategies. So we'll just go with a simple rolling update strategy. This is actually not needed for us. We'll just go with the default one. And you have a bunch of other things. Specifically, readiness probe, liveness probe basically are very important. Liveness probe checks whether the service's replica is currently healthy. If it is not healthy, the replica will be terminated and another one will be started, right? That's liveness probe. And readiness probe basically checks whether the service's replica is ready to receive traffic. Until the readiness probe succeeds, no incoming traffic will be routed to this particular replica, right? So there are a bunch of configurations that you can actually do. All right. So what I'll do is now I will just submit this and deploy it, but you can also deploy this using Python, right? So if I do deploy versus Python, you will get the exact config. What you need to do, you need to download deploy.py and move it to your project root folder with the exact same configuration that you selected on the UI. You can deploy to TrueFoundry via this. So that's one. Another way is deploying using YAML, right? Again, you set up the TrueFoundry CLI, download the YAML file, and then deploy it via a command, or you just use the UI to do it. So let me just use the UI for now, and let's deploy this. So this is what is coming up. You'll see that this is getting deployed. So this is getting initialized. So let's wait for a couple of seconds and let it deploy. So let's do this. Let's go to the second deployment and we'll come back to this. So let's go back to deployments. All right, now we'll again go to the model deployment and let me select a workspace. So I will select a different workspace this time, which is linked to the production environment, and this is on TrueFoundry Azure, this particular cluster. Now what we will do is we'll try to deploy Mixtral 8x22 billion instruct model, and you will notice that we need an HuggingFace access token for this gated private model. So you need to go to HuggingFace and make sure you're logged in, you have generated an access token, and you have agreed to the conditions and requested for access to this model. Once that has been granted, you come back here and add a new secret in the secret store. So you click here on the secret store and you'll be redirected to the secrets tab. You just create a new secret group, name it anything. So I'll just name it this. Select a secret store. So I'll just select SSM for now and enter the HuggingFace token and the value and just create this. Perfect. Now what you need to do is you need to always resync first, right? So if I do this, you'll see that my specific token is not coming up, right? These are different secret groups. So if I do refresh, right, or resync, you will see that the one that we require is coming up. So you select this here and click next. Now you will see that the only option available for this particular model here is CPU. So we will just use that and click continue. And the remaining aspects have already been filled in for you. So you can go ahead and basically just click deploy. But remember that it's always a good practice to do auto shutdowns. We'll do that and we'll just submit. So the deployment will start. All right. So while this is starting, what we will do is we will go ahead and go to the third option of self-hosted models, which is using a service deployment. So let's see how to deploy a model from scratch with service deployment. So I will pick an instance where I have already deployed it. So this is the Llama 3 to 3 billion instruct, which was auto shutdown. Workspace is related to the dev environment. So I'll just show you the configurations that you need to enter to actually deploy this. So this is the service deployment. The name has been mentioned. And as a Docker image, we are using vLLM's official Docker image for OpenAI compatible endpoints. Right. So this is the one where we are using vLLM OpenAI. And the command override is also mentioned, where you need to mention this with specific configurations that will come up from the environment variables. Right, and by default, remember, it deploys, vLLM deploys it at 8000 port. So this is mentioned. This is the endpoint name, right? The resources is T416 GB. So this is something that you have to select. What is the most appropriate one, right? So remember, this is the underlying low-level way to actually deploy a model from scratch, and model deployments actually abstracts a lot of things out. We'll do on demand. Right, I've mentioned shared memory size as 12.6 GB and then certain environment variables. Well, you can see that the model name is this one. This is as per HuggingFace, right? All right. And we are also going ahead and doing certain artifacts download, and auto shutdown is enabled as true. Readiness probe is there. Liveness probe is also mentioned. Labels are also mentioned. And finally, we can just go ahead and submit this. So what this will do is this will update the deployment, and it will basically restart the deployment because it had already been shut down. So now what we'll do is we'll wait for a few seconds and I will show you all the 3 deployments in action. Now what you need to do is you need to basically add a model provider account with these models. So what we will do is we'll go to the models integrations page and click on self-hosted model here and add a self-hosted model account. I will just add a LLM demo model account, and this is fine, right? The TFI user is me, which is a manager level, and I'll just add the models. So now what you need to do is you need to add the name of the model, the hosted model name, and the URL. So let me just copy this information, right? So this is the name. I'll just keep the hosted model name like this, and the endpoint is going to be your endpoint credentials. Model server type is vLLM OpenAI, and that's it. So you just add the model. Let me add another one, which is the second one that we did, which is Mixtrill. Let me just add this, and the endpoint is this. Again, the model server type is vLLM OpenAI, so we'll just add that. And finally, let's add the third one, which is Llama 3.2. URL is also mentioned here. And add. So this has now been added, and you can see that this has now been added. And if you go to the playground, finally, what you can do is you can search for LLM demo, and you will see these 3 models which are available. And once the deployment is stable, what will happen is you can basically chat with each of these models and switch them as per use. Alright, so this was everything about hosting your own models using the TrueFoundry platform. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thank you.